I saw this video by a YouTuber named Perch asking why comic book creators fail at writing social issues into comics. Perch is a comic book retailer, so his insights on the industry, the market, and the customer base are pretty good. In his video, Perch mentions an interview he did with a comic book creator. He doesn't name the creator, and I haven't seen the interview. I probably should have, but for the purpose of this video, I think it's fine. Perch said that the creator thought that comics were a good medium for talking about social issues, especially convincing people to support a particular political view. Perch disagreed, saying that they weren't the right medium and too niche. I think he's right about comics being too niche for that to work. Barely anyone reads comics, at least American comics, so if your goal is to change people's minds, you won't reach that many people. I think Perch is wrong though about comics as a medium not being a good choice. One major thing about attempting to change anyone's mind is having the time to do it. It's hard to do that in a soundbite or a song, but a comic book can be a long-form story, so you have the same amount of time as any novelist or filmmaker or game designer. So if you need to get your message across bit by bit, you can do that. I do think, however, the hurdle anyone using entertainment as their method for revolution or indoctrination is that they have to be entertaining. Otherwise, people won't stick around because no one likes to be preached at. Perch mentions in his video that he said this to the comic book creator using the religious right instead of the far left, and the creator agreed that nobody likes to be preached at until he realized the trap Perch set. Then he doubled back and said that it was different because he, the comic book creator, was also trying to entertain. Except it's not. There are dozens of Christian movies, like God's Not Dead, that are meant to entertain and meant to push a message, and they generally suck. They're awful, pretentious, simplistic, antagonistic, and full of caricatures. Every film has an atheist who's an irredeemable jerk, just a total douchebag. Every chance this character gets, they're making fun of Christians, attacking religion, just going after everything, and usually for no reason. In contrast, the Christian characters are presented in a perpetual positive light. Even when they struggle with their faith or lose it, they're never presented as bad people, just lost. Hugo and Jake, now Hannah and Jake, it's the same person, he just had a sex change, from the Bible Reloaded talk about this all the time. Their breakdown of these films are fantastic because they can pinpoint exactly where it could have worked and why it failed. And it's usually because the agenda is more important to the filmmakers than the story. So when Perch asks why progressive comic book writers can't write identity politics well, it comes down to the same problem. The agenda is more important than the story, and that can be broken down to two issues: a lack of sincerity and a lack of truth. What I mean by a lack of sincerity isn't that these people don't believe these far-left political views. They probably do. What I mean is that their intention is insincere. They're not interested in the dialogue. They're not interested in a dialectic. They're only interested in diatribe. Let's break down what those mean. A dialogue is an exchange of ideas. A dialectic is an investigation of the truth of an idea. A diatribe is simply sharp criticism. It's a lecture. It's an angry rant. You're not talking to a person or with a person, but at a person. And very few people are ever convinced by being talked at. And this is what happens with the far left creators. Perch says in his video that these creators decide they want to talk about racism and tell people that racism is wrong as if everyone doesn't already know this. And then, instead of explaining it, these people treat the audience as if they're stupid. Like, did you know that racism is wrong? Yes, we did. We don't need you to tell us that. And this is exactly how it plays out. Think about the Captain Marvel film. Think about Riri Williams. Think about Ms. Marvel. Think about Secret Empire. Think about X-Men Red. All of these books do the same thing. They talk down to the reader, often attacking them rather than trying to convince them. And that's because convincing them was never the goal. The stories aren't meant to change anyone's mind. They're meant to signal to like-minded people that these creators have the right views, and as a result, their stories lack any truth. Doug Ernst brought this up in a video a while ago, and he came at it from a religious perspective, but it works from a secular perspective as well. What a lack of truth means is a lack of nuance, of subtlety, of substance. These folks may very well truly believe in identity politics, but they're unwilling or incapable of seeing past the agenda. They don't see nuance, which is what you would have to see if you want to get to the truth. Things are rarely black and white. They're usually shades of gray. So if you want to talk about racism, every white person can't be racist and every minority can't be an innocent victim. The reality, the truth, is that both sides have positive and negative views to varying degrees. You can talk about slavery in the United States, but to claim that all or most white people supported slavery is inaccurate. We know that's not the case because it's been documented. That doesn't mean that many white people at the time didn't hold racist views of black people. just that there's nuance. Many of the abolitionists who opposed slavery still didn't want black people living in their communities. There were some who were fine with that, but would never want a black person to marry into their family. And there were some who were fine with that, but didn't want them to have kids together. And so on until you get people who didn't make any distinction between white and black people. And this also plays out in the reverse, with black people holding racist views against white people to varying degrees. But you don't see the far left creators adding that to their stories. They don't deal in multidimensional characters. They don't even deal in archetypes. They deal in caricatures. And that's because the goal is never to get the reader to form a connection to the character or to care about the story, but simply for the creator to lecture the reader for not having the right views, which in turn undermines what little story is there. For example, compare the movie G.I. Jane with Captain Marvel. Both feature gross sexism directed at the main female character, often to a ridiculous degree, but that's where the similarities end. Captain Marvel deals in pure caricature. All the white men are evil, stupid, or cowards. All the women are perfect, innocent, and powerful. They never earn their power, but are instead always powerful and yet somehow oppressed by the infinitely weaker men. When Captain Marvel finally gets full access to her inner strength, she's unstoppable, even though we've never really seen anyone trying to unreasonably stop her. The result is that the underlying story of a woman overcoming oppression never has a resolution because she was never really oppressed, and it took no effort for her to overcome that. More so, no one's mind is changed. The men who hated her still hate her. The status quo remains the same, with the exception that now Captain Marvel can fight back against people who were never really a threat. In contrast, in G.I. Jane, Jordan O'Neill has to prove herself worthy of passing the U.S. Navy Combined Reconnaissance Team training. She faces gross abuse at the hands of Command Master Chief John James Urgale and her fellow trainees. But unlike Captain Marvel, Jordan wants to be treated no different from the men. She works to prove she can literally do what the men do the way they do it. It's not about her being better than them, or even equal to them, but no different than them. Even Urgale finally gives her respect after she survives his torture and attacks him back. At that point, we see that the obstacle was never really the men, but a female senator named Lillian DeHaven, who used Jordan to keep the military bases in her state, and once she gets that, she falsely accuses Jordan of being a lesbian to get her booted out. Once that's revealed and Jordan threatens to expose this, DeHaven drops the charges against her. Then we go to the final conflict in Libya where Jordan's former tormentor Urgale protects her from an attack. When he's later injured, Jordan proves herself a capable leader and strategist by rescuing him, which he is then grateful for. The status quo has changed. Jordan overcomes real problems. Her tormentor changes his ways. She confronts and even controls the people holding her back, and there is redemption for those who want it. Neither of these movies are the greatest movies ever, but they show the difference of what happens when there is truth to the story and sincerity in the story versus when there is only an agenda. It's not impossible for far-left creators to tell well-written identity politics stories. A good example of this would be the comic Excellence. It's clearly about slavery, but so story and character-driven that the on-the-nose commentary is still secondary. You're not gonna miss it, but it's not a hindrance to the story. If more creators wrote like that, they'd be more successful in their attempt to get their message across. But by focusing only on ranting and lecturing at the stupid reader to get them to be on the right side of history, most of these creators utterly fail. Not only in their agenda push, but in basic storytelling. And then they attack the fans for pointing this out. These are the very people whose minds they want to change, yet all the far left creators do is insult them. I'm reminded of a quote from the Hagakure a friend of mine loves to mention. Quote, "For the most part, people think that they are being kind by saying the things others find distasteful or difficult to say. But if it is not received well, they think there is nothing more to be done. This is completely worthless. It is the same as bringing shame to a person by slandering him. It is nothing more than getting it off one's chest. By bringing shame to a person, how could one expect to make him a better man?